This is Southern Fried Sports with Bama Online senior analyst Travis Reier on your home for Alabama sports. Tide 100.9 and streaming on the Tide 100.9 app.
It is 11 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. Time once again for Southern Fried Sports on your home for University of Alabama Athletics. Tide 100.9 FM. Travis Reier, senior analyst for BamaOnline.com, with you each and every weekday morning from 11 a.m. until noon. The show, as always, brought to you by Peterbrook Chocolatier out there at 1530 McFarland Boulevard North in the Indian Hills section of Tuscaloosa. You can give them a call, 205-752-0211. You can still get those Easter orders in, folks. You can go ahead, give them a call, tell them what you're looking for in a basket. Heather, Emily, they can put together the perfect Easter basket for you for that special someone, or baskets. They've also got those caramel chocolate dipped apples that they produce on a daily basis. Oh, you can get those things coated in maybe some walnuts, maybe some pecans. Yes, they got all that for you at 205-752-0211. That's Peterbrook Chocolatier. Put your chocolate order in. They'll bring it right out to the vehicle to you, and off you go. Easy as that. Joined, as always, on the program by executive producer Josh Smith, who together we combine to form the 60-minute man of Sports Talk Radio. Josh, how are you doing on this Tuesday?
Hey, we're doing as well as, honestly, I believe we're doing as well as Tua's doing in his backup drills as he's getting ready. I don't know if you saw that video that he released last night, but the way he was going through those cone drills, he's looking like he was back in the shape that he was looking like before the injury. Yeah,
that was a lot better film. That wasn't the Zapruder cut that we got a few days back of Tua and Talia throwing, right? That was high quality stuff that I got to think comes from, as we've talked about on the program, with pro days out the window pretty much on campus for sure, some virtual sort of pro days that we're anticipating coming up here. And Tua being repped by Lee Steinberg, I'd say they have plenty of resources to get that information out there and kind of help heighten that quarterback fever. Just getting out a little clip or two to feed that fever that these teams have. Throw a little something in the minds of the Cincinnati Bengals. You really think Joe Burrow is the guy? If Tua is back to old Tua? Kind of give the Cincinnati Bengals even something a little think about. You got to think the Washington Redskins have got to at least sit up and take notice of that. You got Dwayne Haskins for your starting quarterback, and maybe Dwayne Haskins is going to be, the next Pat Mahomes. Terms of skill set and those things. Maybe he's got the intangibles of a Tom Brady. Who knows? Maybe Dwayne Haskins, hopefully he is that guy. But Tua, compared to some of these sitting quarterbacks on these rosters, oof. Tell you what would be pretty interesting. What if the Tampa Bay Bucks traded up to get Tua and put him right there with Tom for a year or two? Giving plenty of time. Yeah, giving plenty of time to get healthy, learn from the master, and then put him into that starting lineup down there on the Gulf Coast. It's not going to happen. You're John Ledyard of PewterReport.com, covers the Tampa Bay Bucks. What John Ledyard, who, by the way, came out with his first 3-round mock today there. You can pick that up at PewterReport.com. John, yesterday on the program, he was really trying to sell Jedrick Wills as the Bucks' first-round pick. He would like to see the Bucks trade up for Jedrick Wills because the Bucks have a hole at right tackle. You slide Jedrick Wills right in there, and away you go. If you're the Tampa Bay Bucks with 43-year-old, during the season anyway, Tom Brady coming up. Yeah, you know what else today? We're seeing more and more media opportunities are kind of staggered the way that they're being presented by the University of Alabama. And Nate Oates turned this morning in addressing the media with some insightful and newsworthy nuggets coming from Nate Oates in relation mostly to his roster, and announcing that Kyra Lewis Jr. and John Petty Jr. both will enter their names for the 2020 NBA draft. Now, as you know, in the NBA process, as long as you don't sign with an agent, I believe that's the case, right? You don't sign with an agent, you have until right around Memorial Day weekend to withdraw your name and return to school. So that's still a possibility. Yeah, I'm telling you, there's about, that much of a chance Lloyd Christmas, I believe it was. That Lloyd Christmas in Dumb and Dumber? Yeah. I think there's that much of a chance that Kyra comes back, and probably the same for John Petty. But interesting, no Herbert Jones mention in that trio of players that could have potentially entered their name. Maybe Herbert still giving consideration. I don't know. But Raymond Hawkins, the freshman forward, is in the transfer portal for Alabama, and Nate really spoke to the need to build this roster more along the lines of what he's thinking big picture wise. And so we'll see how that goes. Nate, as we know, going to venture to each and every avenue of talent as he looks to continue to construct an Alabama basketball team more along the lines of what he imagines it to be in the big picture of things. Hey, we're going to talk with Brent Beaird coming up in just a little bit. We're going to go around the Southeastern Conference with Brent. We're going to get running back specific as we move throughout the program as well. So we've got plenty of football talk coming up for you. Just hitting on some items of note here early in the program. Certainly Nate Oates providing an update on the Alabama men's basketball team qualifies as that. Tokyo Olympics being postponed until 2021 now. Going to push them back a year. Will you miss the Olympics? You know what I'll miss and what I'll continue to look forward to in 2021 is the softball. That's what I was most anticipating for the Tokyo Olympics that were set for this summer. I wanted to see softball back in there, wanted to see Australia, the U.S., Canada certainly would qualify from that standpoint, the homestanding team, Japan. I was really looking forward to that. That'll continue to be the case as we look ahead to 2021. Going to step aside for a break. When we come back, Brent Beaird of College Sports Today and First Coast News will go around the Southeastern Conference and beyond with Brent when Southern Fried Sports, presented by Peterbrook Chocolatier, continues right here on Tide 100.9 FM right after this. And we're back with more of a Tuesday edition of Southern Fried Sports right here on your home for University of Alabama Athletics, Tide 100.9 FM. Travis Schreier, senior analyst for BamaOnline.com, with you each and every weekday morning from 11 a.m. until noon. Time to head to the Peterbrook Chocolatier studio line right now and check in with our good friend, Brent Beaird of College Sports Today and First Coast News. And even though, Brent, we should be talking spring practice and pretty much everywhere around college football, and we're not, still a list of topics that we can get into on this Tuesday morning. And one of those, as we bring you on here, has certainly been the discussion involving eligibility among student athletes impacted by this COVID-19 situation. And it looks like, based on your notes here, the NCAA at least is going to start to take formal steps in addressing that beginning next Monday, I guess.
Yes, Trav, good to be with you as always. March 30th. Is the day that they are going to deal with this. So I'm guessing there's probably a lot of committee work that's going on right now. And the thing we mean by this, but basically, and who this will affect, will be the athletes that play spring sports. Now, there's still a little bit of talk about would the winter sports be involved. Trav, I'll be honest with you, I don't see the NCAA doing so because the players that played in the winter basically played 3/4 of their season or so. Certainly not the case for the spring to be able to do that. But again, Trav, my question with this, and I'm sure you've probably thought some of the same things. What's involved with this? It's easy to say this is pretty simple, but you've got roster management, and you've got, how does this affect freshmen who are coming in, and the coach's schedule? So it's not as easy as it looks, is it, Trav?
Administratively, it's one of the NCAA's worst nightmares come to life, because the governing organization, as we'll call it, doesn't particularly like to have to put itself in a position of flexibility when it comes to things like scholarship numbers, and also from the perspective that trying to get these kids through the clearinghouse and eligible. that are coming from the high school level. What are you going to do there? Some of these kids don't have access to testing that they need here down the stretch. Some, if they're more along the lines of, special needs types when it comes to testing, that opportunity isn't going to be there. So the NCAA is in about as uncomfortable situation from kids trying to get into athletic programs, NCAA-sponsored athletic programs, to kids who probably should be transitioning out. But now it appears, at least from the spring perspective, that won't be the case for all of them. I guess one thing that was interesting to me, too, here, Brent, the NCAA is expected to allow colleges to reimburse high school students for money spent on official and unofficial trips to campuses across the country. That I guess led up to this coronavirus outbreak.
That's something that is coming with this, and that frankly surprised me a little bit. I think that's pretty fair in order to have that happen at this point. Now, Trav, this is due on March 30th. Would it, and I guess nothing surprises us with them, but would it surprise you at all if they delayed this 2 weeks or a month?
No, because they don't have to be in a rush. It doesn't appear at this point. I mean, you're seeing leagues, you're seeing conferences, Power 5 conferences. I think April 15th is the earliest that you could see a return to organized team activities. And right now, as we sit here on March the 24th, I don't know anyone that expects a resumption that quickly. That's just on paper at this point, April the 15th. So there really isn't a reason why, though, that the NCAA couldn't act by the 30th, or at least start the process. I look at March the 30th and all this, Brent, as more as a starting date than I do kind of drop dead. Everything's going to be finalized as far as eligibility and getting kids qualified and those type of things for the 2020-2021 calendar athletics year. Now, Brent, some other things that we wanted to talk about with you on this Tuesday edition of Southern Fried Sports, the real possibility, as we continue to hear, at least a modification to the 2020 college football season. Where are you kind of standing on that? What are you hearing about that?
I think that's been the biggest debate that we have talked about on sports radio down here and around the South over the last few days, is what really happens with this. And there's so many tentacles that are coming out of it. I think the thing that I'm hearing more than anything else is there likely won't be anything during the spring, and whatever is done will be added earlier for fall practice. Instead of fall practice beginning, say, August the 1st, I think there's some thought that they may be able to give, or teams would start a couple of weeks ahead of time, maybe in after mid-July or something at that point. And by the way, folks, remember mid-July is SEC Media Days in Atlanta, if we're able to go through with that at this point. So, and I'm curious if you're hearing the same thing. More here of what would be added to fall practice instead of really anything getting done during the spring.
Yeah, it's amazing. We've talked about it here on the show. All the different sports from late winter through spring and fall that are talking about condensing their seasons into what could be a 6-month stretch. Yeah. I'm still not sure how we're going to make all that happen. I guess we could see NFL games at 9 a.m. on Tuesdays, maybe in November, or maybe Vanderbilt Ole Miss football on a Wednesday at 7. No, but in all seriousness, it seems everything's being thrown around. I know Dennis Dodd of CBSSports.com last week had a piece that we talked about extensively here on the program, the possibility of just conference games, a condensed schedule, a shortened schedule, and it involves just conference opponents. But with that, man, you start talking about cutting Power 5 and FBS football games. Boy, the economic hit on some of these athletic departments, and not just not just middle tier FBS programs or Division I athletic departments. You're going to feel that at the Power 5 level too.
Well, in another debate that we got into a couple of days ago here, Trav, was that the interesting fact of when are fans going to be comfortable in going back? Yeah. This centered more around the baseball season. Let's say it started the middle of May or June 1. When are fans going to be comfortable going back? And I think you could say the same thing for college football fans. Let's say the schedule starts on time with a Labor Day weekend, and I'm sure this would be a nightmare for ADs too. What would be how much almost begging to a point are they about their fan bases and reassuring them, look, we've done everything we can to the stadium, we've disinfected it, we've cleaned it, et cetera, et cetera. Trav, I wonder how much of an impact that's going to have as far as when are fans going to be trusting enough to where they want to go back and sit in the seat.
Yeah, you were already dealing with an attendance issue.
Yes.
In college football. So this is absolutely what you did not need, on top of already having to try to convince fans to come to the ballpark in perfect conditions, let alone this situation. I think the answer to that question, Brent, you tell me what you think. I think it's going to be regionally based. I think SEC fans would go to Bryant-Denny Stadium tomorrow.
Yeah, they would.
I think there's plenty that would go tomorrow. The Pac-12 was one of those leagues that was having a tough time getting people to the park when it was perfect. So I think that becomes more of a regional sort of issue than anything else. But there's no mistaking the fact that it was already an issue that these leagues in the college football folks were dealing with.
Well, and the other thing with this too is, Travis, how much is this going to delay what these ADs wanted to do, particularly in terms of Wi-Fi and particularly in terms of that they're going to change out some of the seating in some of these football facilities, either being built and so forth, and obviously Bryant-Denny Stadium, from what I understand, is still on schedule. But I think that's another piece of this that we haven't talked about that much yet either, is how much does this slow down the construction schedule of some much needed facilities for some of these schools, even in the SEC, or really does it at all?
Yeah, that's the great unknown. That's exactly where we're at in all of this. It literally is a day-to-day type situation as we look ahead to the fall of 2020. Now, let's look at this season as if there's actually going to be some games, and particularly some games of note. I see some SEC Game of the Year lines here from Bet Online. You've got Alabama minus 15 against USC in Arlington, Texas. Alabama also listed as a 7-point home favorite over the Georgia Bulldogs. Otherwise in the league, a Texas LSU game, if it gets off the ground, could be interesting, with LSU a 6-point favorite in Baton Rouge. And then back in the league, I think a game a lot of people are going to have circled, Texas A&M at Auburn, because expectations for A&M are pretty high here in the preseason or the offseason. Auburn, a 3-point pick at home in that one. Which of those lines sort of struck you the most in looking at them, Brent?
I think a lot of these lines are determined by the whoever's playing at home is certainly getting a favored situation with that. I'm intrigued by this Tennessee-Oklahoma game that a lot of people haven't talked about that much as far as what Tennessee's going to have coming back, and could they keep that a little bit closer? I think the one that intrigues me a good bit right now, Travis, is this Ole Miss Baylor thing. Can we say that pick 'em right there is probably pretty favorable when you've got two new head coaches, new quarterbacks, new systems, and so forth. Trav, we really don't know what to think of that game right now, do we?
No, we don't know what to think about a season in general. But yeah, hopefully there are some really fascinating type matchups. You got Michigan at Washington. That's a cool game in Seattle.
Yeah,
and you said it, Tennessee on the road at Oklahoma is an 8.5 point road dog for the Vols in what would be a very highly anticipated year 3 under Jeremy Pruitt up in Knoxville. Brent, I wanted to get your thoughts too. We're gonna get more into in the next segment Alabama's opponents for the upcoming season and the running back position specifically. Let's talk about the league and the running back position that we anticipate for the upcoming season. And, when I look at it, obviously some big time production going out the door. Certainly when you talk about the situation at LSU with Clyde Edwards-Helaire moving on to the National Football League, DeAndre Swift from Georgia makes the move. You had the top 2 backs in that rotation actually move on from Athens. So when I look at individuals in the SEC returning, who do you sort of pin as if you had to pick your top 2 running backs for preseason All-SEC honors right now? You've got Kylan Hill out there.
Yeah.
You've got Isaiah Spiller out there. Najee Harris, obviously, right here at Alabama. You've had a little bit of upheaval at Auburn with Boobie Whitlow entering the transfer portal. What do you got right now for 2 running backs if you had to pick a couple in the league heading into the 2020 season?
I'll give you a couple of guys on the same team that I think are going to be fascinating, particularly if they're healthy. Florida's offensive line comes back almost intact at this point. Malik Davis and Damian Pierce, Trev, behind a much better settled offensive line. Could those guys make some noise?
Yeah, and Pierce was a guy that was early on in his recruitment committed to Alabama.
Yeah, that's right.
And then made the switch, I believe, from Bainbridge, Georgia. Made the switch to the University of Florida during the process. There's a guy like Rakeem Boyd, too, that we probably don't talk about enough at Arkansas because those teams have been so bad.
Yeah.
Rakeem Boyd has yet to play in a game in which Arkansas got a win in Southeastern Conference action. Think about it that way. And all he's done is be productive. I mean, he's coming off an 1,100-yard year in 2019. This is a guy who can catch it pretty well. The shame for Rakeem Boyd is that it's gone largely unnoticed because that team has been so bad. But I got to think Sam Pittman is going to be, as an old offensive line coach, pretty dedicated to getting Rakeem Boyd the football and perhaps getting it from Felipe Franks at the quarterback position.
And the offensive line is going to be huge for them as far as keeping Felipe upright, too. And, Trav, a couple of guys, if they're healthy, that I think are going to be instrumental with this new scheme is going to be at Georgia with James Cook and Zamir White. Trev, we've heard so much about Zeus and what he can do, but unfortunately he has never been healthy. And listen, Travis, how important is it going to be for them to be able to run the ball until Jamie Newman and those receivers can all get on the same page?
And with the turnover you've got on that offensive line at Georgia.
No question.
And I like the hire of Matt Luke, and I thought it was to Georgia's advantage to be able to go ahead and get Matt Luke in there for bowl preparation and moving towards that Sugar Bowl matchup against Baylor. But I'm with you. Zamir White has torn both of his ACLs, left and right, since 2017. Zamir White is kind of the Bo Scarborough, I'd say,
that's
of Georgia football.
Yeah.
Because remember, Bo had the same issues with his knees,
right?
And Bo was hell when he was well, and that's going to be the question with Zamir White. Although a year fully removed from his last knee injury, perhaps we'll see that guy that so many anticipated being a dominant player on the college level. You said it about James Cook. I think LSU, Auburn, Georgia are all pretty similar. And again, I'll get into this more in the next segment. Even Tennessee, more and more it seems like, I guess, Brent, we're seeing a by committee approach at the position.
Well, we are.
Even in an era where you've got 5 stars like you got John Emery at LSU going into his second year, Zamir White. I think Eric Gray at Tennessee is one of those guys in a committee situation that could emerge this year.
I don't think there's any doubt about it. And you mentioned Auburn and what they could be able to do, obviously, with DJ Williams, and particularly the freshman coming in. And I don't mean to harp on the offensive line, but you and I both know how important it is. Trav, how big could the running game be at Tennessee with Trey Smith and those sophomores coming back? Well, that could be if they find a quarterback, that could be a pretty dangerous offense by the end of the year.
You got Brandon Kennedy back, I guess, for another year. The Alabama transfer from a couple of years ago. I don't know what Cade Mays' status is in terms of immediate eligibility coming home from UGA, but absolutely. I actually like the situation that Eric Gray, Ty Chandler, those guys are in Knoxville because of that offensive line, probably even better than I like the situation at LSU, Auburn, and Georgia, because really Auburn's offensive line the last couple of years hasn't been very good. But with what LSU and Georgia are losing up front, I think those are going to be bigger question marks than the guys working behind them getting the football. We're talking with Brent Beaird of College Sports Today and First Coast News on a Tuesday edition of Southern Fried Sports presented by Peterbrook Chocolatier. So what are we going to do as we wait here, Brent? I mean, what's next? What are you anticipating in terms of important data that will be presented or given to us as it relates to this ongoing pandemic and its impact on college athletics? What are sort of your reasonable expectations for where we're headed for potentially the fall?
I think probably the next thing I want to know is when do we get word that something may happen in the spring? Now, I know there's been some of these other conferences. Rick George at Colorado commented on some of the possibilities of maybe some of the schools in the Pac-12 maybe getting a couple weeks in, even in May or early June or something like that. I still think that would be rather difficult to do. So that's the thing I'm looking at now is we know there are not going to be any spring games. If there were going to be any kind of announcement coming up in the next few weeks about the possibility of getting a little bit of time in, or would they go ahead and say, we're going to try to add something to the fall practice? I think Auburn. Go ahead.
I see where Mac Brown of North Carolina in your notes here. It's been suggested among ACC coaches perhaps a 10-day sort of mini camp in July that would precede fall camp in August, and then the hope that you can sort of maintain the integrity of the 2020 college football season as it sits today anyway. And that's before you factor in the impact to college football recruiting, college basketball recruiting in some of these upcoming months. That's topics for another day. But Brent, as always, we appreciate you taking the time with us here on Southern Fried Sports. Always great stuff with Brent Beaird. If you haven't already, give Brent a follow on Twitter at Brent Beaird. That's BEAIRD. Thanks a lot, Brent.
Trav, always a pleasure, and hopefully Pops is still in the house and not been regulated to the backyard at this point after spending too much time with Nana.
Yeah, I think he took self-quarantine to another level at the end of last week. Like, he was literally self-quarantined. Pops has got this little workshop off the main living quarters there on the west side of Jacksonville, and I think he may have been relegated to that shed because of his behavior. I checked in on him after the weekend. It sounded like things were going better, so
good.
That's about all we can hope for with Pops. Poor right. Nana, man. Poor Nana. All right, Brent, we'll do it again next week. Thanks, my friend. Always
a pleasure, pal. Take care.
There he goes, Brent Beaird of College Sports Today and First Coast News. Back with more of a Tuesday edition of Southern Fried Sports on Tide 100.9 FM. Going with a little Thomas Earl Petty for your Tuesday playlist here on Southern Fried Sports, because why not? Why not a Tom Petty Tuesday? The late, great Tom Petty. As we've talked about before on the program, if you're going to assign bands, acts, musicians to particular SEC towns, well, it's obviously Tom Petty with Gainesville, Florida. That's home. That was home originally for Thomas Earl Petty. So we give you some Tom Petty on this Tuesday. It is Southern Fried Sports, presented by Peterbrook Chocolatier, right here on Tide 100.9 FM. Travis Reier, senior analyst, with you each and every weekday morning from 11 a.m. until noon. Speaking of that Gainesville area, extending to the northeastern section of the state of Florida there in Jacksonville, we always appreciate Brent Beaird of College Sports Today in First Coast News joining us here on the show. Always good stuff with Brent. Again, thank you very much to Brent Beaird. We've been talking some running backs a little bit throughout the program today, and with that, wanted to get into one man's opinion as to the top 5 opposing running backs for Alabama on its 2020 regular season schedule. And I'm going to sort of preface this by saying I like some running back rooms among Alabama opponents, maybe more than I even like individual backs from some of these opponents, some of these opposing teams that Alabama will face, hopefully will face during the 2020 season. So with that in mind, I'm going to start the countdown at number 5 with Chris Curry of LSU. Now you hear Chris Curry and you think in terms of succession plans to Clyde Edwards-Helaire there in Baton Rouge, you would think it would be more along the lines of Tyrion Davis-Price and John Emery Jr. Those two guys were kind of centerpiece recruits for LSU's 2019 recruiting class, and they both saw action. Davis-Price and John Emery both saw a good bit of action as true freshmen last year, but down the stretch of the 2019 season, it was actually Chris Curry who, when Clyde Edwards-Helaire was sidelined for that college football playoff game against Oklahoma, it was Chris Curry, then a redshirt freshman, who got the call. So look, there's still going to be competition there between those 3 backs, Curry, Davis-Price, and John Emery. But based on how the 2019 season finished, I'm going to go with Chris Curry of those 3 guys. And again, more of a running back room situation, running back by committee situation than a standalone back. Similar, I think, in ways that we're going to see at Auburn and also Georgia. I think DJ Williams with Boobie Whitlow moving on from there, DJ Williams becomes more of the obvious choice to be at the top of that depth chart for the Tigers. Same for Zamir White, with a couple of backs, including DeAndre Swift moving on from Athens. Zamir White would look to be the top guy going into the 2020 season, but I think it could be, in those situations as well, kind of a committee approach, which we're seeing more and more, it seems like, in college football in recent years. Certainly right here in Tuscaloosa, you've seen it with Damian Harris, Josh Jacobs, Najee Harris over that extended stretch, really in the succession plan to Derrick Henry dating back to 2016 after Henry won the Heisman Trophy in 2015. That's what you've seen at Alabama. Now, Najee last year became more of that guy, and certainly the expectation will be for Najee to continue in that role in making the decision to come back for a final season here at the University of Alabama. Number 4 on this top 5 list of opposing running backs that Alabama will face during the 2020 season, I'm going to go with Eric Gray. And again, another situation at Tennessee where you're talking about sort of a 3-headed monster in the backfield because of Ty Chandler, because of Tim Jordan. You know, those guys are going to be a couple of seniors coming up this year, but Eric Gray, the sophomore, really showed you down the stretch of last season what he's capable of doing. He went off against Vanderbilt, also had a big game in the Gator Bowl against Indiana. In those 2 games, 39 carries combined for Gray, 332 rushing yards. So he averaged about $165 a game, went over 200 against Vanderbilt in the regular season finale. Also caught the ball pretty well. 13 13 catches for 115 yards. And a situation, once again, that could be shared in some ways, but I like Eric Gray's upside. I think he has a chance, especially with an offensive line for Tennessee that should be really among the very best that the Vols have had in the post-Phil Fulmer era. I think that running game has a chance to be really good, and I kind of envision Eric Gray leading the way in that regard. Number 3 on this list, I went with Isaiah Spiller, the true sophomore from Texas A&M, nearly 1,000 yards in 2019 as a true freshman, had 10 rushing touchdowns. Didn't have really the best statistical game against Alabama last October. Carried 10 times for 27 yards. He did catch a career-high 5 passes for 41 more yards, and he was also an All-SEC freshman honoree a year ago. Did most of his best work once that schedule, which was so brutal early on. The first half of that 2019 schedule for Texas A&M was especially tough. And you saw Spiller, as a result of that, really start to do some bigger things statistically once he got into the likes of Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Texas, San Antonio, South Carolina, some of the very worst run defenses that A&M saw all last season. That's when Spiller started to show up. I like his size. He's a former 4-star recruit. He's going to continue to have competition there in Texas A&M. Kind of like Eric Gray and the backs at Tennessee. I like as much what A&M returns up front with 4 starters coming back, including 3 seniors for Jimbo Fisher's offense in 2020. Number 2 on this list of top 5 opposing running backs on Alabama's 2020 schedule, Rakeem Boyd. Now, these next 2 guys, Boyd and our number 1 choice here on this list, a little bit of a surprise, kind of along the lines of Najee Harris, in that, you know, there was sort of this expectation that Rakeem Boyd might very well turn pro, especially after he ranked 4th in the SEC in 2019 in rushing yards per game at 94.4 yards per clip. He averaged 6.2 yards per carry and rolling up 1,133 yards on the ground as a redshirt junior. He caught 19 passes for 160 yards. And in the Razorbacks' 48-7 loss here in Tuscaloosa last season, Rakeem Boyd had 105 yards from scrimmage. Now, 55 of those came on 4 receptions, but he did carry 12 times for 50 yards in that game as well. In his first of 7 100-yard rushing performances in his 2 years with the Razorbacks to this point, the first of those 7 100-yard rushing performances came against Alabama in 2018. He's sort of a poor man's Darren McFadden. When you see Rakeem Boyd in that number 5 jersey, it's hard not to think of Darren McFadden. Doesn't really have that burst, maybe the home run ability, but again, 6.2 yards per carry as a back in the SEC West a year ago. I think he certainly legitimized his claim to a lofty spot on this list. Number 1, topping the list of opposing running backs that Alabama will face during the 2020 season, went with Kylan Hill. Again, another guy that as the 2019 season wore down, you sort of expected to go ahead and take that plunge and make the move to the National Football League. Ultimately, Kylan Hill decided against that. And with that, Alabama will see Kylan Hill as a 3rd-year starter for the Mississippi State Bulldogs. A year ago, 1,350 yards. He led all SEC running backs in yards per game at 104 per contest. As we talked about a few days ago here on the program, your top 2 yards per game rushers in the SEC last year were quarterbacks, I guess you could say, in Lynn Bowden Jr. of Kentucky, more of just kind of a wildcat option once the injuries really mounted up there in Lexington. Mark Stoops and his staff really had no other choice but to put Bowden kind of in the shotgun and let him run wild, which is what he did. John Rice Plumlee, similarly, of Ole Miss was in that group. Those were your top 2 yards per game rushers in the SEC last year. But as far as just running backs go, it was Kylan Hill at the top of that list. And with Mike Leach coming in, I know there's sort of this expectation that the workhorse approach for Mississippi State running backs that's been pretty common offensively in Starkville throughout the years is going to take a back seat. And maybe that'll be the case to some extent. But just in terms of total touches, I don't see that going away with Kylan Hill, especially as a receiver, because a year ago in Mike Leach's final season at Washington State running back Max Borghi caught 86 passes last season. Now, look, there are some runs that are counted as passes. They're essentially run plays based on how the play design comes together and how the play sort of unfolds. So you got to take that with a bit of a grain of salt. But, yeah, Kylan Hill, both as a receiver and still as a runner, is going to be very much a central focus of that Mississippi State offense, even with Mike Leach and that air raid making its way to Stark Vegas. There you go. Top 5 opposing running backs on Alabama's 2020 schedule. When we come back on a Tuesday edition of Southern Fried Sports, we'll get you out of here. It's SFS, presented by Peterbrook Chocolatier on Tide 100.9 FM. Back with more of a Tuesday edition of Southern Fried Sports right here on Tide 100.9 FM. Travis Reier, senior analyst for BamaOnline.com, with you each and every weekday morning from 11 a.m. until noon. We've done our best. We've done our best to pack a lot into a little bit of time this morning. It's already been a long day for yours truly. Was up at 4 o'clock this morning because the oldest daughter back to Honolulu. Yeah, went ahead and did it. Figured if she was going to be quarantined, it was going to be in Waikiki. So I don't know if I can necessarily blame her. Not crazy about the whole travel thing in these conditions. But based on what she related to us after she connected this morning in Atlanta to Honolulu, it's like she had a 757 to herself. So, yeah, nobody on those planes, which maybe should have told her something, perhaps.
Plenty of social distancing going on.
Yes, I took comfort in that. And, in Honolulu, in Hawaii in general, starting at midnight tomorrow night, Wednesday night at midnight, there's a mandatory 14-day quarantine that if you enter the state, if you fly in to the Honolulu airport, you will immediately go into a 14-day monitored quarantine. That's what you're looking at. So a little bit of urgency to go ahead and get back over there. It's been a lot of fun on this Tuesday. We had a lot of fun talking with Brent Beaird, talking some college sports, We certainly hope that you're taking every precaution you possibly can to keep yourself healthy, keep others around you healthy in the process. Still a lot of movement in the sports world, a lot of consternation, a lot of wonderment about what's next in sports based on the evolution of this COVID-19 virus. You're still hearing from some of the major names in sports. Locally, it's been Nate Oates today, the Alabama men's basketball coach, disclosing that both Kyra Lewis Jr. and John Petty Jr. will, in fact, enter their names for the 2020 NBA draft. Start that process anyway. We'll have an opportunity later on to make a decision perhaps to return to school. I would say doubtful in probably both those cases with Petty and Lewis, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes. You heard the lunch whistle. I would typically tell you to head to Heat Pizza Bar for lunch today. That's what I did yesterday. Got a couple of 3 pies to go from Heat Pizza Bar downtown Tuscaloosa at Government Plaza. But what we've learned this morning, Heat Pizza Bar has updated its hours of operation. Still going to be open for you on a limited basis moving forward. Now those hours are Sunday through Thursday from 5 to 9 p.m., so dinner service basically. Friday and Saturday going to be open 12 p.m. to 9 p.m. So you'll have lunch into dinner on Friday and Saturday. It's takeout call-in only at Heat Pizza Bar. So I know Frank and Will and the rest of the good folks there at Heat appreciate your support during these limited times. You can give them a call at 205-632-3282. That's 205-632-3282 and place that takeout call-in order there, and they'll take great care of you. Josh Smith did an outstanding job, as usual, producing the show. Thanks again to Brent Beaird for joining us. Thanks to you for listening. Until 11 a.m. on Wednesday. Have a great rest of your Tuesday, everybody.